Welcome to all of you, and thanks for being here. Orlando, you flew in from the UK, I'm guessing?
Yes. Yes, I did, yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, we know about wildfires here, unfortunately, and just about everywhere on the planet, I think, does now. I believe there were severe wildfires in Greece over the summer. I mean, we're hearing about it in Siberia. So it's a worldwide problem. But let me ask you first about this devastating wildfire in Portugal. Being in the UK, you probably heard about it or was familiar with it when it happened?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was big news. I think it was one of the in Europe. I think it's quite easy to sort of put the climate crisis at arm's length, and it's events like this that have been happening with increasing frequency that are reminding us or making us all aware that it's not at arm's length. It's not somewhere far away. It's on our doorstep. And maybe people in California are much more aware of that. But in Europe, that the signs of climate change haven't been so sort of in your face.
And how did you find the characters in the film? They're very compelling. It's such a moving film. And Vitor, what he has gone through, but the firefighter and the other people in the town, they're all so compelling.
Well, it sort of began actually with Professor Crowther, the scientist, and who's one of the main characters in the film. His work, read in the newspaper, he counted trees originally. No one had ever counted trees before properly, and he worked out that there was 3 trillion trees on Earth. And then the next question in his mind was, well, how much space is there to possibly plant new trees or restore new trees? How much room is there on Earth for new trees to grow? And he calculated, and him and his team calculated, there was room for 1 trillion new trees. And if those trees were allowed to get to full maturity, they could draw down potentially draw down 2/3 of all the CO2 that human beings have put into the atmosphere. So it's this extraordinary discovery, and so we got in touch with him to sort of follow that story. And it turns out at that point he was really trying to study looking at particular areas and degraded land and what trees were best suited for those places. In Portugal, because of the fires, he was looking, and because of this eucalyptus problem, he was looking there. So we sort of followed that work, and that took us to Portugal Grande, this town where the devastating fire had happened.
I know in Australia, of course, there's a huge number of eucalyptus trees, and that is part of the problem because I guess it's a very oily leaf, and it'll just kaboom. And it was so interesting to hear that it's not native to that area and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it's cheap. It grows, with very little care. You look at eucalyptus is actually it's a sort of product of colonialism. It's sort of spreads where colonialism has gone across the world, but it's in Portugal it covers just enormous chunks of land. And when you look at it, originally it looks like, oh, this is beautiful forested land. It's really lovely, and actually when you understand it as a scientist, it sucks up all the water. There's very few other species. These are sort of like green deserts, and of course, it's like a matchbox basically.
And Spencer, for your film, and you actually work for Time, right?
I do, yes.
All right, so you can tell us how and why and when Time got into short documentaries. I think that it's fairly recent that the unit.
It's definitely, so I joined the team in 2016 and they had started that a few years before, but definitely within the last 8 years, it's fairly new. And even more recent, it's grown to Time Studios as well, which covers not just short docs, which works a lot with the magazine itself, but beyond that to broadcasts and series and features as well. So it's on the newer front, but we have had access to amazing stories for almost 100 years now. So I'm glad that they're starting to tap into that reporting for docs as well.
Yeah, and before Time, you were at the LA Times where you won a Pulitzer Prize. Congratulations.
I was part of a very talented team. Yes.
You're being very modest, but you're, obviously then you're steeped in journalism, and I think we see that in Notice of Eviction, that it has a journalistic sensibility about it, and yet it's very much a character-driven film as well. So that similar question I asked to Orlando, but about finding those characters, Rhonda and Dominique, who were also very compelling. And
yeah, absolutely. And I wish that Kathleen could be here to talk about this as well, because she is an amazing journalist, and found both of them through a project that she has been working on for a long time that tracks Confederate statues in Louisiana and tracks how the erection of those statues has linked to systemic racism in every facet of society in the state, whether it be education, whether it be housing. And so with the housing piece, she met Alexis, who's Rhonda's lawyer, through a photographer friend. And it just so happened that it lined up with this explosion of evictions that was happening, 5 months after the pandemic started, as jobs continued to not be available, as landlords pretty much reached their limit in terms of what they would allow or not. And when you have landlords like Rhonda and Dominique, they're a bit slumlord on that side. And yeah, she followed the both of them. She initially reached out to my supervising producer, Justine, who was very gracious to allow me to edit. And I'm always so grateful to work with Kathleen. She's an amazing filmmaker and journalist, and her sensibilities towards this are always to be 100% accurate and correct. And the audience for this initially was immediate, because it was an ongoing news story and people were actively getting evicted, and we wanted it to get out in a way that educated the public. But also, on the same side, as an editor, I connected with them immediately watching that footage, and I wanted to make sure those moments weren't lost as well. So it was a tricky balance.
You certainly are not lost. And if we continue the theme of characters, Snowy. Snowy is your main character, but there's wonderful human characters as well. But I'm sure you get asked this, but how in the heck did you hear about this turtle and think, you know what, there's a story there that needs to be told?
Very good question. So everybody in the film, that's my uncle, my aunt, my cousins. So Snowy has been part of my life basically for as long as I can remember. And every year we'd go back, and I just didn't understand how this turtle was still clinging to life and this sort of sad version of a turtle life. And Caitlin, the writer and co-director, I was talking to her, I was like, I think there's a story here. And she's like, yeah, I don't know, I think we need a little bit more. It's like just a turtle in a basement. And so, you can only go so far with that. And so we're like, okay, well, how can we push the story? How can we expand? How can we really get inside the mind of this turtle? Which is a weird question to ask, but we somehow wanted to get to the bottom of it. And so I think we started with the animal psychic and then the local vet. And we're like, okay, we need something more. How can we understand what does Snowy need, and kind of keep digging. So calling up, Yellow Pages, turtle experts. Actually, the first person we reached out to was Irene Pepperberg. She's a professor at Harvard who studies parrots and worked with a famous parrot named Alex, different Alex. And then she's like, I don't think I'm the right person. You should call Dr. Anna Wilkinson. She literally studied. She's the person you need for this film. And so Caitlin comes in. She's like, I think we have to go to England. We have to do this. And so then we had to keep it a secret from my family, because the whole part of the film was sort of how can we present this information back to Uncle Larry, so he can kind of see Snowy in a new light and see kind of where he thought he was, doing the right thing. He also bought Snowy or got Snowy pre-internet, so they're like following the instructions on the back of the box kind of thing. And that's sort of a little bit of the backstory.
Oh, that's fascinating. And how did Snowy get the name Snowy?
Oh,
Do you know?
This is a really not that exciting of an answer. I think my cousins liked skiing, and there's snow there, so Snowy.
Put Snowy on some skis, and
Yeah.
that would be exciting. But do you feel like there's sort of a philosophical element to your film, which is just delightful, of the question of what is happiness, and in a way, can we help bring happiness to others, or help build an environment where people or pets or turtles can be happier? But do you see a sort of moral to your
Yeah,
to your
definitely.
film?
I think that here's this living creature. It kind of became part of a routine, and Uncle Larry really thought he was doing right by the turtle, but we kind of needed to show and poke and prod him that you may be think you're doing the right thing, but actually you don't have all the information and you don't know like what a living creature needs. And then also, if you kind of zoom in on something for long enough and look at it, you're going to find an interesting story, and you're going to find a subject worthy of spending 2 years on a turtle film. So yeah, everybody deserves to sort of be understood and kind of understand really what they need deep down, kind of without bringing what you think they need. So I think anybody could watch this and kind of maybe go back into their life and say, okay, what have I taken for granted? What have I just kind of gotten to a routine, and how can I like shake that up?
Yeah, and we see a transformed turtle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so lovely and touching.
My favorite part of the film was, I mean, a lot of the narrative we kind of had to push because the turtle wasn't going anywhere. Uncle Larry wasn't going to do anything with the turtle. So at first we're like, how can maybe we force him to like give it up to a turtle sanctuary. He didn't like that. But I forgot where I was going with that.
Favorite
But-
part of the film? You said your favorite part of the film.
Oh yeah, it was just sort of seeing the transformation, like that was, of Uncle Larry really kind of coming around.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a transformation for him and others who see the film
too.
as well. And Orlando, you have worked in feature-length documentaries, and you have a feature-length documentary coming out in about a week, Convergence. And then you won your Oscar for the short, The White Helmets. For this particular subject, or any in general, how do you sort of decide and weigh whether it feels right to be a short versus a feature?
It's a very good question. I think there's lots of different reasons. Sometimes I think there's an urgency of story that feels, features can typically they definitely take longer than a year, sometimes 2 years, and if you want to if the story feels urgent enough, you want to get it out, a short feels better. Other times it's maybe just the subject matter just doesn't lend itself to that long length of time. And otherwise, I think sometimes with a short you can experiment more creatively. That it'd be very difficult to do over sort of 90 minutes.
And Spencer, for you, you've worked, I think, mostly with shorts. I don't know. I always think about it's attributed to Voltaire, whether that's correct or not, I don't know. But supposedly he said, back in the day when people wrote a lot of letters, writing to a friend or something and saying, well, I'm going to write you a long letter because I don't have time to write a short one. Suggesting that it's actually a lot harder to write a short letter or something like that. What about the short form, appeals to you?
I love the opportunity to very quickly connect with other people, and then also very quickly share that with our audience. I think while shorts don't necessarily lend you to following a narrative for a long period of time, I do think it allows you to very quickly get to the heart of a story and get to the thing that most of our audience can immediately connect with. And I like that it also lends us the ability to do a lot of them as well. Of course, features are nice to be able to spend longer time on that, but there's a lot to be gained in shorts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was not that many years ago where, shorts, I think kind of almost the only way you could access them was in film festivals. And, there's, whether it's the New Yorker or the New York Times, the Guardian, Time. No, that's really, there are some wonderful platforms where you can see them. And they're not, I don't know, they don't just disappear or something like that, and they can have a real impact. And going back to the substance of the film, it's certainly kind of like the New York Times op docs. It's very, very timely. And, it was just a few weeks ago, I guess the Supreme Court had ruled that the CDC's moratorium on evictions was not constitutional. Now, your film raises a question of whether that moratorium was really helping that many people, certainly in some cases. But, this is potentially, this could be over 1 million people who are evicted now, so it's a huge issue.
Yeah, it definitely is, and Kathleen has checked in with everyone involved in the film, and Alexis, who is Rhonda's lawyer, just said that recently it is the worst that it has ever been, because combined with, of course, hurricane season comes around every year, combined with the national moratorium ending and the disaster protections that came after Hurricane Ida. I think she said in the last 8 days, she alone has taken on 35 eviction cases. And she's one lawyer in a city of, not that many lawyers, but it is overwhelming. And I do think that the pandemic is a disaster in itself and a special disaster in itself. But I do think the film is also hearkening to what climate change is going to continually bring about in these systems that don't have safety nets as more hurricanes come, as they're stronger and bigger, and people are out of jobs longer. This is going to continually be an issue if there is not a correction to it.
And of course, that ties in thematically with From Devil's Breath. I was certainly struck with notice of eviction that, we're really talking about internally displaced people and who are effectively refugees. And that's a looming crisis for the world coming that, how many people are going to be displaced because of climate change? With all the research that you did and speaking with the professor in the film, it has to be a subject, of course, of great concern to you, Orlando.
Yes, it's. I don't exactly know what the figures are, but it's potentially hundreds of millions of people if sea levels rise. Mm. It's shocking how many giant cities around the world, from London to New York to Miami and New Orleans, that are all going to have severe problems. Talking about the pandemic, I think one of the things that I hope can come out of all of this is that it's shown how small this planet is, how we are all connected, and how we all have to work together to fix these global problems. So maybe that can be one of the kind of learnings that's come from this very difficult 18 months.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. One hopes that's true. I think we have time for a question or two, but while you are pondering possible questions, I want to find out how Snowy is doing.
Snowy's doing great.
Oh,
he's
I'm
loving his new house.
So relieved to hear that.
Yeah, he's thriving.
You mentioned the parrot expert at Harvard. I'm no ornithologist, but parrots or certain birds live a really, really long time. So it's like, I guess Uncle Larry didn't realize quite what he was in for.
Yeah, I may be inheriting Snowy at some point.
Are you ready for that?
I don't know. It's a big responsibility, as we've seen, because Snowy's 25 now. He could end up living to 50 or 60. Yeah.
Oh, so your expert in England kind of gave you a sense of the potential lifespan then.
Yeah.
All right. That's a major, well.
And then the fortune teller also gave us good news, long lines,
Oh.
Yeah.
Was she looking on the shell, or what was she?
Yeah, the paw. Or I don't know, what do you call it, turtle hand?
Oh, good question. Are there questions up here for the audience? I can't really see, but I guess I don't see hands going up. So I wanted to ask about, so Snowy is about to go on the time.com website, right?
Yes, it is.
And you premiered at Sundance.
We did.
What kind of reactions have you got to the film? I suspect people are just really touched by it.
I'd say most people are just happy to watch maybe sort of a happy film this year.
Yeah.
And, we always get, animal stories back. So, oh, my gecko, it's like 50 years old. Like, I very rarely connected to it. I think the only one negative reaction we had was somebody said, I started shaking with rage and crying, and I hated Uncle Larry. How could he do that to the turtle? And I feel like this person must have had some other, turtle baggage they were bringing into this story.
A little projection going on there, perhaps. Orlando, those who were studying the credits, probably noticed the name Leonardo DiCaprio come up. Obviously, we know that he's very involved in supporting documentaries on environmental themes. But how did you connect with him for your film?
Well, he supported a film we made about 5 or 6 years ago called Virunga. Yeah. And so this film obviously fits into a lot of the themes that he supports already. And he's got involved in that capacity to help support the film and the underlying message.
Mm-hmm. And Spencer, for you, what's your next project? You know, you're doing shorts. Like, sure, you know, well, tons of those per year. But what's next for you?
I personally really love editing. And my role is a senior producer, so I'm asked to do a lot of things across the board. But I'm just looking for more projects where I can really sink my teeth into, like this one. Long or short, I'd be fine with either.
All right, so audience members, if you have ideas, I think you know who to speak with there. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us, and congratulations on your films. They're so moving and took us to so many emotional places, and I think certainly left me and others, I'm sure, with a lot to think about, and just admire all your filmmaking skill. So thank you, Orlando von Einsiedel, Alex, Wolf, Lewis, and Spencer. And you are going to tell me how to properly pronounce your last name.
There are two ways.
Oh, all right.
People usually say bacalar in America. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter, but it's technically bacalar, but I always just say bacalar because it's easier.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Please, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.